Thank you. Now, if you haven't been living under a rock for the past few weeks, you've definitely heard a rumor or two when walking down the market square. How did King Duncan die? What happened to Macbeth? Who's the villain? Who's the hero? It may not be as it seems. That's why, tonight on this historic episode, I have gathered not only our regular group of lovely ladies, but all of the ladies of the lords and kings involved in this breaking story of former king and possible traitor, Macbeth. We have even required the help of a witch, who insists on going by witch number 3, to bring back our sadly deceased ladies for one night only. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this one night only tell-all episode of The Real Housewives of Scotland, featuring witch number 3, Lady Banquo, Lady Lennox, Lady Meredith, Malcolm's fiancée, Lady Macduff back from the grave, the servant's wife, Lady Ross, and the one and only Lady Macbeth. Oh, tell us, how did this all begin? Hello all, young and old. There is a grave story to be told, one that starts with Macbeth and ends with death. Some say we're to blame, my sisters and me, but all we did was tell a small prophecy. Sitting at the heath came Macbeth with his friend Banquo, I believe. We told them he would be Thane of Glamis, Cawdor, and the king. Banquo was the one who refused to leave. We sent him on his way with his own future. Happier, but not. Greater, but not. But fathering kings, of that we were sure. But that's all we did. A few fortunes. I won't fib. What Macbeth did after that has nothing to do with I. Oh, and I told my sisters I'd say hi. I'm so cold now. I'm always cold. If it weren't for that letter, that letter, I would be alive. I would be alive and I would be warm. But he told me he would be king. I couldn't believe it. I told him we had to act right away. I started as a lowly lady. I married up to Thane of Glamis. I never thought I could be queen. I never should have imagined it. I never should have even thought of it. My love, he's gone, you know. And it's all Lady Macbeth and Macbeth's fault. Good riddance. He used to talk to me about Macbeth all the time. They were best of friends, but that traitor Macbeth was all greed. Banquo told me about the prophecies. He was so happy that Fleance would become king. He was a greater Macbeth than Macbeth ever was. Always caring about his family, always caring about others over himself. After the battle, my love Malcolm was named the Crown Prince. We were just courting at the time, but even then my heart swelled with pride. He has always been so brave, so cautious. He deserved that title and he deserved to celebrate it, not walk into a bloodbath where his own father would be killed. We should have been happy. He had fought valiantly in the battle, killing the merciless Donald. I guess we just ended up like him in the end. He became Thane of Cawdor and I should have been grateful. But I hatched the plan. I fear that I pushed him down the path that led to such horrors. The king came that night. Macbeth, my poor weak husband, he didn't want to do it. I should have listened. Why didn't I listen? We could have been happy, but no. We decided we would kill him that night. So, what happened that fateful night? Fleance, my dear sweet boy, he told me that Banquo had seemed worried for Macbeth, and he told me that Macbeth was asked by Banquo if he was okay, and Macbeth lied, and he said he was. that he wasn't even thinking about the prophecies, but clearly he was. But my husband, the loyal fool, he didn't say a thing. I could tell Macbeth didn't want to do it, but I rang the bell and he went into the room, and he came back covered in blood, so much blood everywhere. I was worried, terrified, but he didn't have to know that. I helped him clean up, but Macbeth, the weak fool, didn't place the daggers, and there was so much blood, and I went into that room, daggers in hand, to frame the guards, and I haven't stopped seeing the red since. Everywhere the blood. He looked like my father when he was sleeping. It's still on my hand now, the blood. It doesn't leave, the blood, it doesn't leave. My dear husband Lennox was told by the king to wake him early, so that's what my husband and Macduff did. The wretched porter took ages to reach the door and let in my good husband. Had the fool been quicker, Macbeth would have been caught red-handed and I would still be alive, and my husband would have never betrayed me. The knocking. We rushed to our room at the sound. I can still hear it, and we cleaned off and we put on nightgowns, but my hands are not clean. They'll never be clean. Look at my hand. Sorry about that. Lady Macbeth is still facing some horrors, as we can see. So, what happened when they found the king? My husband told me about how he found the king dead, though he spared me the details, deeming me too womanly. All I know is that everyone freaked out. I hear Macbeth killed the guards that he had apparently framed on the spot. I heard that Macbeth was so ruthless that Lady Macbeth fainted. I suspected Macbeth as soon as this happened, but no, a lady doesn't know political matters. And yet here we are. It was horrid. That was not my Macbeth. Macbeth was sweet and he was kind, a good soldier, but he was weak. And yet here he was, killing men he knew were innocent. I had created a monster. Ross told me what happened. Apparently Macduff told him that Malcolm and Donabane, the king's sons, had fled. Clearly they were behind Duncan's death. Why else would you flee if you're not guilty? Macbeth was named king, and Ross headed to Scone for the coronation, sending for me to meet him on the way. If anything, Macduff was the suspicious one. Imagine not going to your king's coronation. My husband suspected foul play immediately. He returned to me and the children in Fife instead of going to that coronation in Scone. He knew that the king's sons would not go behind their father's back and kill him. Immediately, he began to send for ways to seek to help them. Ross was the fool, along with the rest of those thanes. They blindly followed Macbeth. I just wished Macduff had stayed. I wish he wasn't so driven to do the right thing. Malcolm sent for me with a letter. I was scared. We weren't yet betrothed, and I was hearing these terrible rumors that he had killed his father, but I loved him. So I followed him to England, and in secret we met up. He told me the true story, how he suspected Macbeth, how he didn't know what to do. That was when we started planning his revenge. All this was happening, and yet Macbeth was still coronated in Scone. What was that like? I must say, the coronation was gorgeous. They fed us the most decadent cakes, and Lady Macbeth was in a brand new stunning dress fit for a queen. And I left shortly after the coronation. I bid farewell to Leonce and Banquo, and that was the last time I ever saw my dear Banquo. Ah, yes, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. Banquo's death is still fogged with mystery. Perhaps you ladies are able to provide more clarity to the matter. Macbeth had been king for a bit before the night that Banquo died. According to Lennox, Macbeth made this huge announcement saying that he was saving a seat for Banquo, and he was so excited for him to be there. He should have been happy, but instead he spoke of riddles. He didn't tell me what he was going to do. Banquo was our friend. There was no need. My husband was a servant for Macbeth, and he was the one who was sent to fetch the murderers who Macbeth planned to hire to kill Banquo. Now, my husband didn't know what was going on, and he was quite scared, but he told me that the murderers didn't even know what was going on, and they didn't really want to kill Banquo right away, and that Macbeth was the one who had to convince them. I heard a third was hired to oversee the murder of Banquo. I won't point fingers, but I heard that Ross was out when the murders took place. My husband and I refuse to be associated with these claims. We have always been loyal and good to the throne and the kingdom. He was plagued by the idea of Banquo fathering a king, of Fleance becoming king, but to kill a child? That was not something my husband would have done. Yet here he was, killing another person, planning another murder, and more blood that still can't be washed away upon my hands and upon his. Leonce was able to escape. His brave father sacrificed himself so he could flee. Leonce came and he and I went into hiding. I didn't even get to grieve properly because of that horrid Macbeth. What a terrible event. Yet I hear a dinner party took place right after, if I'm not mistaken. The dinner should have been nice. But Macbeth began the night with a gleam in his eyes I had not seen before. And then he saw the ghost. I heard he went pale as snow and started shouting at nothing. I heard that my husband offered him a seat and he refused to sit because the seat was taken. I told him to calm down, and he managed to for a second, then it happened again. Face pale, eyes wide, he shouted and he cowered in fear and he saw a ghost. But how? There was nothing there. Banquo was dead, not a ghost, and he had gone mad. My husband and some of the others began to question him after that dinner. How could we let Scotland be ruled by an insane king? Very interesting. So, what happened after that night? That night he spoke of Macbeth. He had fled to England, and my husband had evil in his eyes. That poor woman and her children, even more blood that won't wash away. He told me he would go to see those wicked sisters again, get another prophecy. It all just led to more blood. Ah, I see. So did the witches give more prophecies? By the heath we sat, legs crossed on a mat. Then came Hecate, our leader, wise. She told us to feed Macbeth with lies. My sisters and I had created a problem, but in Macbeth's defeat we would not be solemn. False confidence we decided to give, so that Macbeth would die and Scotland would live. As tragic Macbeth did approach, into our stew I placed a roach. He came with fire in his eyes, demanding a prophecy as his new prize. Apparitions we did make, their appearance made his stoic face shake. Their first was an armed head, though very undead, said, "Beware Macduff, beware Thane of Fife, dismiss me enough." The second made Macbeth's eyes go wild, for it was the sight of a bloody child. It said, "Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born." The third looked scary, even to me, a crowned child carrying a tree. "Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam wood to Dunsinane Hill." That is what the third said. And these prophecies convinced Macbeth he would not end up dead. Macbeth came back. He came back, but he never returned. The Macbeth that came back, he was all greed, all power, all ambition, and he felt no guilt, not as he ordered that poor family to die. He was drowning in murder and power by hands just getting, my hands just kept getting bloodier. Red used to be my favorite color, and I can't stand it anymore. I can't stand it, but it's everywhere. 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 Sorry about that, folks. Bringing back the dead to life is tricky business, and sometimes there are some hiccups. Anyways, so tell us how Lady Macduff and her children all ended up dead. I was with my son. We were smiling, we were laughing, talking about how Macduff had betrayed us by leaving, but we were joking around all the same. We were happy and we were innocent, and then the murderers came. My poor brave son tried to fight, and he was slain right before my eyes. And I ran, and I saw the bodies of my family, of my servants, of my friends, and of children. My children, dead before me. And then the world went dark as I sliced through my back. And the last thing I remember was pain. Pain and sadness that I would never see my children's smiles ever again. What a terrible event. So, what was happening with Macduff in England in the meantime? Malcolm had had many people sent by Macbeth to try to make him return to Scotland, but my wise love sent them all away. That is until Macduff came. He won my Malcolm's trust, and together they discussed a plan to destroy Macbeth. Old Seward and Malcolm had arranged some 10,000 soldiers ready to attack Macbeth. With the help of Macduff, they were able to get some other lords and thanes on board. It was just perfect. Scotland was just in such a horrid state at the point. People were poor, they were crying, they were dying, and the smell was just putrid. Ross and I agreed that we would help any way we could. Lennox also agreed to help, and we sent some of our own men to help the ones Seward had assembled. This has led us to the final hours before Macbeth's fall. What were those like? I could not sleep, I could not eat, all I could see was blood, and I spent the days thinking of Macbeth. He was cruel and he was evil, and I was the queen, but I was not happy. The world was meaningless and it was covered in red, and I just kept reliving those murders. He looked at my father lying there, and they got me a doctor, and they told me I would spend my days and nights walking and talking, but all I remember is dreaming of blood and him lying there dead, all of them dead. By that time, most soldiers were ready to fight against Macbeth. My husband said that he discussed with his friends how the ones that fought for Macbeth didn't do so out of love, but out of fear. My husband tells me that Macbeth was overconfident even though he knew that the army was coming. My husband remembers overhearing about the queen and that she wasn't feeling well. Something about sleepwalking and mumbling. But Macbeth didn't seem to even listen to the doctor's advice. He didn't even really seem to care. And instead, Macbeth just seemed to be consumed by his confidence, even though the army was approaching. I must say my husband was quite scared at the time, and I'm lucky that he's back at home safe. What was happening back on the battlefield? My dear beloved rallied all the soldiers together. He insisted that they camouflage themselves using the branches and leaves of Burnham. Now isn't that just so smart? So that Macbeth's men wouldn't even know how many soldiers were coming. I heard that from the castle, it looked like Burnham Woods was moving up Dunsinane Hill. That's funny, isn't it? I couldn't do it. The blood was everywhere. I was at the castle and I could hear shouts that the woods were moving. But I couldn't care, not when all that blood was there. All that blood, nothing mattered when there was that much blood, so I ended it. Then and there with a scream, and I was gone. Macbeth's poor wife took her own life, and yet Macbeth didn't even seem to care. My husband told me that if anything, Macbeth just seemed inconvenienced by it all. After all, the woods had started to move. Apparently, Macbeth did not feel confident anymore. Something about a prophecy? Regardless, my husband saw Macbeth's eyes fill with fear. My Malcolm told Seward to lead the attack when they reached the castle, and that him and Macbeth would follow behind. Apparently, young Siward fought very valiantly against Macbeth. He died a soldier's death with wounds on his front. Macbeth decided to face Macbeth on his own so that no one else would have to fall. And they met, and at first Macbeth was winning, but according to those prophecies that Macbeth followed, he could only die from a person who was not born of a woman. And apparently, Macbeth was untimely ripped from his mother's womb, so therefore he was not naturally born of a woman. So Macbeth was able to kill Macbeth, and it was quite fabulous, all of it, his head on the stake. Everyone was parading around, Scotland was free again from his tyrannous grasp, and my Malcolm went on to his rightful throne, and we were officially betrothed the day after. So there you have it, folks. That is the story of Macbeth, as told by our lovely ladies of Scotland. So, believe what you may, but remember, here in Scotland, things aren't always as they seem. Until next time on The Real Housewives of Scotland.